Welcome to the Senate Committee on State and Local Government Operations. I see 4 members here. We're going to start. It's 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock Alabama time. All we got to do is have a presenter for a bill. Sweet mate. We were waiting to get a good bill out here. We didn't know which one to call first, but we got a quorum. We're here, baby. We're waiting on you. Let's talk about Senate Bill 62. Right there, right there. You're up.
Hold on, give me 2 seconds. I just left my last committee.
Senator Summers, do you swear that the whole testimony you're going to present here today is going to be good? Actually, Carden, get up and let Clint get up and go first. He's going to be quick. You're going to be a lot longer than he is.
Come on.
Senator Dixon, would you please join us? I think your bill will be a little faster than his.
I think
If you like to present Senate Bill 28, Senator Dixon, we'll make that fast and easy for you.
yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I would probably also recommend that you ask that Senator Summers, if he's of sound mind as well before you get started.
Thank you for the advice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I bring before you Senate Bill 28. What it is it's repealing a bill from 2002 that at the time just affected Fulton County, and it was a population bill. It started out at 500,000, but it was amended, and what was finally passed was 800,000 in dealing with setting the chairman and the commissioners, the board of commissioners in Fulton County's pay. So any county that has a population over 800,000, this bill would affect. And currently it's Gwinnett County and Fulton County. And a little backstory of why I was wanting to raise the chairperson or chairwoman's salary in Gwinnett County. We had a previous chairwoman who served 2 terms, and she did not, at the time they went through a compensation increase, and they increased the district commissioners. The chairwoman at the time did not want the increase because she was formerly a county employee and had a retirement benefits that she was collecting currently, and that's why it was not raised. Currently it's 77,000, give or take, is the base pay. Looking to raise it to match other Metro County chairperson's salary is what the end goal of this would be. But first we got to repeal this before I could propose that legislation. Be
Any
happy to
questions for our fine Senator Dixon? Seeing no questions, I'll entertain a motion. You have a question, Senator Steele? Yes. Oh, well, go right ahead. We'll put you on the mic.
Senator Dixon, which counties would this encompass at the north of 500,000?
It would be, it's my understanding that the final bill that was passed, it ended up raising it to 800,000. So currently it would just be Fulton and Gwinnett.
Got it.
I believe Cobb and then DeKalb would be very close to that, but they are currently not over 800,000.
Very good. Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
I believe our whip had a question over here, or maybe motion. Well, your mic number 1. I'm not sure why it's not warming you up. There you go. Now you're on. Go ahead with your motion.
When the time is right, Mr.
It's time.
I would make a motion to pass.
Thank you, Mr. Whip. And I believe I heard our distinguished senator from Milledgeville is going to second that motion. So all in favor, please signify by raising your hand. I know some of them couldn't tell right from left, so I'll make it easy. The motion is unanimous, carries unanimous. So thank you, Senator Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll get you in and out. Well, we're not going to waste a whole lot of time here today. Said the next bill said I believe Senator Summers has a little bit of information for us. So Senator Summers, you're mic number 1 and you're hot.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Hey, guys, I want you all to know I'm bringing you a bill that's been about a year or so in the making, and we've had many committee hearings. One of your members here sat in on committee hearings with us on several times during the past year. And what we're dealing with is a little issue called homelessness or unsheltered. I'm sure none of you probably have any thoughts on that much, but I'm gonna probably open your minds up today and give you a little bit about it. This bill started out many pages. We've had a lot of opposition from different people that wanted things changed in the bill, that we're stepping on toes. We were doing this, we were doing that. We're taking money here, we're taking money there. We were saying arrest somebody, do this, do that. Never once was this bill intended to criminalize any person sleeping on the street, sleeping on the sidewalk, in a tent, wherever. Never once. So just know that in mind and some backstory before we get started on how things work. And is this for the AJC? You want to make sure? I just want to make sure.
We're not the same.
Thank you. Anyway, going back to what I was talking about is, so what we've done is we structured a simple bill. We came up with a simple bill that we think, after all the hearings that we had, that we think will constitute what we believe will be a start at helping at least work on the homeless issue that we have in Georgia. And this is not indigenous to Atlanta now, folks. Obviously, Atlanta has the problem, and they're the big gorilla on the block when it comes to people sleeping on the streets, unsheltered, et cetera. But this is for all 159 counties in Georgia. This bill will encompass all counties. The bill simply has 3 sections, and they're very, very simple. The first section, forbids the local governments for, unsanctioned camping on the street and makes them enforce their laws if they want to. So far as we know, all counties and cities and municipalities are doing that. So we're not singling out anybody. We're just simply saying we're trying to get the governments to help us move people to safe camping areas. That's all this is about. Simply as that. Number 2, the second section authorizes the state auditor. And this is the most important part of the bill, guys. This is the most important part of the bill, to audit all these monies coming into Georgia that are designated or earmarked for homeless or unsheltered. We absolutely have no idea how much money is coming in. We don't know exactly where all the monies are going. And in our committee, even our Senator Davenport recommended an audit on this bill, and we're setting it with the state auditor to complete an audit and return it back to us so we'll know exactly where monies are being spent. And frankly, that everybody should welcome an audit. I mean, everybody should welcome an audit. And there is, as Senator Robinson, they pointed out in several of our committee hearings, there's so many 501(c)(3)s, we couldn't count them all out there that are working on supposedly these problems. So that's what that bill does. And the third thing is, we set up an area, that the DCA. I think, Mr. Chairman, I think you met with DCA. I believe they're all good with this bill here. We took out what they wanted about. I want to let you know there was a part of the bill. If any of y'all are confused, there's been several subs to this. And by the way, we are working off LC 339373S. LC 339373S. That's the latest sub on the bill. And we're trying to create sanctioned camping areas for people. There's a lot of vacant property in every city. Doesn't matter where you go. And we're trying to figure an area where people can go to have a safe place to sleep at night, possibly get a shower, use the bathroom, facilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what that bill does. It authorizes DCA to work on creating some type of housing, possibly permanent housing for people that may be or may not be sleeping on the sidewalk. And basically, I don't know about the short-term or the long-term effects of that, but I know one thing. When somebody can sleep safe at night, that's what this is about. That's getting them off the street, under these bridges, off these interchanges, and getting them into a safe area where they can at least have some dignity. And that's basically what this bill's about, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Summers. I've got a sign-up sheet with quite a few people that want to speak on the bill. I'm not sure I'm going to go for a long time on speeches on the bill, but I will tell you, your bill, as I understand it, is really just targeting those that are sleeping under dangerous places. And it's not really designed, as I understand it, to take the homeless and solve that problem, but it's to put them into safer places. So for me, one of the things that's important is, we need to do more. We need to do some things to get these people in a place where they can be in a safe, secure area, take showers. And I've been told by some of the folks that are working with you on this that probably 2/3 of those folks that are out sleeping on the street right now are very capable of going to work and getting a job. They're mentally sound, said they, and to me, we need to do something more. But in the meantime, we need to get everybody off of the vast campgrounds all across the state. And that's where, I see that in my district. I'm sure a lot of people see it in their district. So
Well,
I believe
there's-
our first,
You're right about that. There's unsheltered and there is homeless, and you're accomplishing both. That's right.
that's right. So our first person, and I'm not sure if he's a judge or not, but he's got his name down here as Judge Glock. So Judge Glock is presenting on Zoom today. If I could get our magic of the audio visual and throw him up on the screen. Judge Glock, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Are you actually a judge?
No, my apologies. Common source confusion. Old family name that constantly makes it difficult when testifying or doing other work.
Okay, well, I had an uncle named Judge as well, so I get that. Well, if you would go ahead and tell us what you got to say.
Yes, thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. And first of all, my apologies for not being in there in person. My flight was canceled this morning. But just want to most importantly second what Senator Summers said. This is a narrow bill that is designed most importantly to improve the homeless services and spending in the state of Georgia. It's not directed at any city or place. It's designed to make more efficient and more productive spending and more effective use of resources everywhere across the state. Now, I'll just deal with a quick second on the performance audits. Obviously, the state of Georgia authorizes many performance audits of different government programs, and this merely directs the auditor to focus on homeless spending, which, as the senator said, is substantial and somewhat to this point unknown, the extent of it. This has been done in many other places and states and cities. The city of Austin recently did a performance audit on homeless spending. The city of Dallas did one as well. The state of Washington had their state auditor look at homeless spending and use performance audit. The end result of these was in no sense an accusation or attempt to play gotcha with any of the people doing good work on homeless spending. Was designed to make in each of these cases homeless spending work as efficiently as possible and make sure the state was aware of what resources were going where and how much they were contributing to the end result that we all share, which is the decline and reduction in homelessness, most especially among the unsheltered. Now, on the enforcement section that Senator Summers noted, I will also second the goal here is obviously not criminalization. The goal is not to arrest people who merely don't have a place to stay. The goal is to help make sure that cities encourage people to go to shelters or services when necessary, and that no city takes a drastic step such as blanketly allowing unsanctioned camping across streets and parks across the city. We've seen what happens when some cities do that. The city of Austin in 2019 repealed their existing bans on street camping and street sleeping. And immediately you saw a 45% increase in unsheltered homelessness. You saw a 20% decrease in sheltered homelessness, implying that clearly people were moving from the shelters into the streets. And you saw an incredible increase in homeless deaths and violent crimes against the homeless. The goal here is to prevent any city in Atlanta or city in Georgia, not Atlanta, not any other city in the state is currently has such a policy as Austin implemented, but make sure that no city or county moves down that unfortunate path. Make sure they continue doing what they are doing, which is to help people move into more secure and safe situations. And that gets the final and third portion of the bill, which is the sanctioned camping section of that. Sanctioned camping is not an ideal solution in all cases. It's most importantly, though, a first step for many people who are living in unsanctioned camps among the streets or sidewalks. We've seen many places do this already. The city of Austin has obviously done this already. Seattle has done one. And I will mention that the mayor of Portland recently said that he was going to clear all the unsanctioned camps across his city and move everyone to 3 large sanctioned camping areas. Now, this is not saying this is where everyone should go or must absolutely go, but is merely providing the Department of Community Affairs an option to spend on a particular form of homeless housing and services that can be put up quickly, efficiently, and cheaply. I'll note that some studies show that these sanctioned camping sites can be set up for as little as $100 per space for tents, or as little as $3,000 to $5,000 for these tiny homes that can be placed in these places quickly to allow people to sleep there. So I welcome any questions from the committee. As Senator Summers says, the goal of this bill is narrow to help improve social spending and social services and help achieve the goal we all want, which is to reduce the tragedy of unsheltered homelessness.
Thank you for your remarks. I don't see any questions, so we'll let you go there, Judge, but thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.
If I could, Cindy, I'm going to call on Cindy Battles. Is Cindy Battles here? And if you would, Miss Battles, if you'll sit there beside Senator Summers, we'll get you on the.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Cindy Battles, and I am the policy director for the People's Agenda. I have a little bit of confusion because Chair, you just mentioned that this bill is not about ending homelessness, and the judge said it is about, sorry, it's going to be in my head now. Closed with this is what we hope to do. If the bill's job is to remove homeless people so that you don't see them as often, so that you're not then uncomfortable by the sight of homeless people, maybe this bill does what it's supposed to. However, we had a whole study committee over the summer about how to end or at least decrease unsheltered homelessness, and none of the 26 recommendations, except for 2 of them with regards to the audit and using some temporary funds for mental health and recovery services, are in here. As someone who has worked my entire life, my first job I got when I was 15. I've worked at least 1 to 2 jobs my whole life. I've never had a drug problem. I raised 2 kids and we were homeless twice. Nothing in this bill would have helped me or my children. Number 13, which is create a pathway for unsheltered and shelters homeless renters to have their eviction records sealed or expunged after 3 years if necessary. That would have saved me and my kids. Number 21, by this body's own admission, increasing the minimum wage would help eradicate poverty, which means you would help end homelessness. So what I'm asking is, even if we're going to pass a temporary fix, and I have serious issues with this legislation that some of my partners are going to comment on, and they're smarter than me. But if we're really going to work to end unsheltered homelessness, let's use the results of the study that the taxpayers paid for and actually pass some of these things, which wouldn't cost the state anything, but would help a number of people who are experiencing homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Battles. Are there any questions? I don't see any questions, so we'll move on to Isabel Otero.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Isabel Otero. I am the Georgia Policy Director for the SPLC Action Fund. And we're really glad to see Senator Cardin and members of the committee and the study committee trying to find solutions to the state homelessness issue. We do have a few concerns with this bill, and like Ms. Battles, we are disappointed not to see more of the recommendations from the study committee included in this bill. So in section 1 of the substitute, the SB 62 prohibits counties and municipalities from exercising their judgment and discretion regarding enforcement of orders or ordinances prohibiting camping, sleeping, or obstruction of sidewalks. Now, the issue with this is that the removal of this law enforcement judgment interferes with very well-established tradition of police discretion, and that coexists with mandatory arrest statutes. And we have some U.S. Supreme Court case law that we'd be happy to share with the committee on this. I work with a bunch of great lawyers who are looking at the bills that we're tracking, and they have some good recommendations for how to mitigate some of these things. Similarly, on lines 32 of one of the subs, I think, but it's where there's a private citizen that would be allowed to sue the state. That again violates that same longstanding principle of constitutional law, which states that there is no protected right to have law enforcement exercise their discretion in any particular way. And so while this is putting municipalities at risk of being sued by the state or by a private citizen, it's also going to open them up to potential federal lawsuits, because we've seen, in Florida, for example, which is interpreting 11th Circuit law, which also binds the state of Georgia, they enjoined the city of Ocala from enforcing its lodging ordinances because arresting people experiencing homelessness for sleeping when there is no other available shelter for them is considered cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment. And so there's, you're forcing, unfortunately, the way this bill is written, you're either going to get sued by the state or a private citizen on behalf of the state, or by somebody trying to enforce federal law. And having municipalities choose between either of these two things is going to inevitably lead to some lawsuits, which is going to, do very little to actually solve our homelessness issue, but it will have a significant public cost. And I think the Senate committee, found that the legislature could both protect and expand existing funding for housing resources and create a funding mechanism to provide operating support for the continuum of care agencies. And this bill doesn't foreclose on that, but it also expressly authorizes and encourages the use of American Rescue Plan funds for sanctioned encampments. And once again, with all the constitutional lawyers that I work with, they are very concerned about these kind of camps, right? These sanctioned camps without proper implementation, without proper oversight, have been found to flout the US Constitution. And we've seen violations of the 4th Amendment, 8th Amendment, 14th Amendment, when these kind of camps are created. And we want to make sure that, there is no current baseline or for standards or rules on how to sort of operate these camps. And simply by saying in the bill that someone might not be liable for any violations, federal law is not optional. You might be liable anyway, right? For violating someone's constitutional rights. And so we really do urge the committee to reflect on the findings of the Senate study committee from last year, and find more ways to fund permanent supportive housing. That is the number one way that we can actually solve homelessness, rather than sort of creating this situation where we might have unending lawsuits about unsheltered homeless and camping. And we know we want to come talk to you, Senator Cardin, about this. We've talked to you already about one of your other bills, and we definitely wanted to flag those things for the committee and for the author, and make sure that you all know we're available to help in any way we can.
Well, I
Thank
think I appreciate your testimony. I think that there's an opportunity here for multiple things. One of them is, okay, what this bill appears to do is to make sure that local governments are not doing things that are promoting more homeless, the camping in the streets in different places. It would get them, if they condone a place, they have, through the state properties or through local government, they have a place that's safer, has more facilities. I think that'll help, but it's really not going to solve the problem. And I don't think that's what Senator Summers was, and I have talked about. But I've got a question from Senator Robertson said first, and then the Senator Estevez said
Thank you, Ms. Satara. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Do you have any case law that you can reference on the federal where
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to email it to you if that's helpful. But
Yeah,
can
what I
give you the
want
case.
is on the sanction camps.
Yes.
I know I believe they did this in Houston. And so, and I know that the results were extremely positive, but now is the case law decided?
That's a great question. I can
Okay.
let me get you.
If you'd give me the references
Absolutely,
to the
yes.
suits that have been filed, that'd be great. And you could email
Yeah.
that to me.
Absolutely.
Now, to something you said at the beginning, you brought up officer discretion.
Yes.
And if I look through line 16 through line 23, and I'll just briefly touch on this. It says a county or municipal corporation shall not adopt or enforce any policy under which the county or municipal corporation prohibits or discourages the enforcement of any or ordinance. Isn't that protecting officer discretion?
So because the way this is written, you can be sued for not enforcing. You sort of are forced to, it's written in such a way where you're going to require enforcement or risk a lawsuit.
What I just read, it says a county or municipal corporation shall not adopt or enforce any policy under which the county or municipal corporation prohibits or discourages the enforcement of any officer ordinance. Every briefing I've had since I was 22 years old, no one ever told me, Randy, you cannot enforce these laws. You
Right.
should not enforce these laws. We would talk about things of jail population, court overcrowding or something of that nature, not in hopes of encouraging officers to go out, because we're very opposed to revenue-based policing. But so I'm just trying to see where this right here takes away officer discretion.
So in explicitly prohibiting something and then creating the consequence of being sued, right? You are requiring something. It's making something mandatory where it might not be, where the officer would have discretion to decide how to handle a situation rather than just arrest the individual. So, but again, I'm happy to give you the case law and all the.
If you'll send me,
yes,
and these are
absolutely.
undecided cases, right?
Yes,
These are
so
lawsuits.
Some
Yeah.
of the lawsuits that,
And-
it's Supreme Court case law around, law enforcement discretion that we would
Right.
happily send to you.
Well, and I have a lot of that already around officer discretion. My contention is on the second part is the way I read it, it is not, it is anything, it's protecting officer discretion so that a city can't come in and say, hey, Officer Jones, do not go out and arrest anybody for
Right.
doing this. That is taking away officer discretion. And because of certain circumstances that the Supreme Court has allowed in case law dealing with laws of using officers using reasonable means of determining what's being violated.
Right.
I think when you have ordinances that definitely, or orders, policies that say you cannot enforce this particular Title 16, Title 40 or something like that, that's when you're telling these officers, that's when you're taking back officer discretion. What
Yeah.
I'm reading here doesn't, but, and I want to be perfectly clear. When I talk of case law, and I know you're an attorney and I'm not.
I'm not one of the attorneys, but
Okay.
yes, but I
Well,
work for
great.
an army of them. I'm
Yeah.
happy to get you.
Yeah,
the
and
case law.
yeah, but decided case law is
Yes.
what I was asking for. Cases
Yep.
that have been adjudicated related to sanctioned camps that where the US Supreme Court has come back and said these camps are unconstitutional. And I understand there's ongoing cases.
Right.
I'm looking for decided case law.
Okay,
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
happy to get that for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I believe, Senator Estabaz, you've got a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Terrell, thank you for your testimony. A couple questions. I'm putting on my lawyer hat here and going along with a similar section to where Senator Robertson was. The one issue, we want to make sure that there are clear standards in this law,
Right.
so that they can be enforced, whether it's through lawsuit or anything else. And if there are vague terms, it could be an issue to have that happen. So I understand what prohibits means. Discourages, I think, is a term that can be used that is ambiguous.
Right.
Can you talk about concerns you might have around terms like discourages?
Yeah, so the attorneys that we work with have essentially said that the way this is written, prohibiting or discouraging are however you want to interpret this section, right? Whether it's to protect or to, sort of disallow discretion or however it is. The fact that there is then a consequence for whatever decision you make, right? And so if somebody decides to enforce something or not enforce something at their discretion because they're the person at the scene, whatever has happened, we are worried that requires somebody to act, right? In order, if the consequence is you're going to be sued if you don't do this, either by someone in the community or by the state, then you are sort of being required to act in some way. I think the other problem that we're seeing is there are several bills, not just this one, but there are several bills that are going after prosecutorial discretion in some way or discretion in general at the local level. And so the state is seems to be trying to sort of control, right? So this discourage word is concerning because it's about how people have decided to deal with whatever's happening in that particular community. And we think that the best sort of accountability that you can have for either a prosecutor that you disagree with or a sheriff or somebody else in that community is the voter, right? The voter gets to go and decide later on whether or not that's the person that they want in that position. And so, but I think discourages is getting at this piece of sort of what it is that community or that law enforcement body is prioritizing at that moment.
Can I quickly ask you, and there may be lawyers testifying a bit later, but
Yes.
On the case law that you've seen related to the Eighth Amendment, it seems to me that there should be standards set for these sanctioned camping areas. Have they talked about, in the case law that you've seen, what standards should be illustrated?
No, so what we've seen is that, a lot of these camps are not equipped to handle all kinds of people that they might need to support, right? And so you have a situation where there might be a sanctioned camp, but it's not ADA accessible, right? Or there may be some issues with someone with a disability being able to get access to support services, be able to stay in that particular sanctioned camp. And so currently there are no baseline standards for these kind of camps. And that is one of our concerns, right? That as these things move through the courts, we are seeing violations of constitutional law over and over and over, because these camps are, one of the options, but not maybe the most successful option at actually addressing homelessness, which would be permanent supportive housing, actual housing for folks. And I think that is part of the report, and something that I think we would like to see more of.
So Tara, I'm going to have to cut us off there with you. I've got several folks that want to testify, and I'm
Yes.
going to try to move us along a little bit faster.
Thank you so
Senator
much.
Mallow, did you have a question, or did you want to pass? Okay. I appreciate your testimony. I'm not sure if I'm reading this right, but is it Coco Pappy? Okay. Ms. Pappy, and if I would, I'll encourage you to try to be as brief as possible, and we'll try to limit our
Absolutely.
discussion as much as time as will allow.
Absolutely. Chairman and fellow senators, thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Coco Pappy. I'm the Director of Public Policy at Deep Center, which is based in Chatham County. I want to speak on the fact that I understand that this bill is a temporary solution for an issue that many municipalities are grappling with, and we absolutely need space where vulnerable folks need mental health care and access to substance abuse treatments. But I do kind of want to level set at what we're looking at in Chatham County. So Chatham County has the second highest rate of homelessness in Georgia. In our 2020 count, we identified about 1,000 homeless individuals. About 600 of those are chronically unhoused, right? So people who have been homeless for a very extended period of time, and this would be a good resource for them, right? But a much larger count of homelessness in our county includes about 800 students that we can count. So these students are enrolled in our public school system, and they are experiencing homelessness. They're usually classified as hidden homeless, right? So meaning they're young people who are experiencing episodic or transitional homelessness. And again, the statistics about young people who are homeless tend to be very scarce, as they don't typically access the same service as adults. And there can be many reasons why people end up unhoused in Chatham County, and I'm sure everyone's heard all of the reasons, but what we primarily see as a struggle in Chatham County with families and youth are poverty and a lack of affordable housing options. We also have an extreme lack of safe shelters and transitional housing that do not accommodate families. And that is something I'm just hoping we can kind of consider a little bit deeper. I think drawing your attention to Section 3, lines 64 through 66, where it talks about sanctioned camping areas and specifically providing small shelters for no more than 2 individuals for an agency or an organization. So I think this is especially important to note because I mentioned before, we have about 800 of those children who are homeless alongside their families. And right now we do work with families who are either staying in cars or in short-term hotels or camping. And I want to be very clear, none of these options are safe, right? None of these are good options. But my fear is with those families in particular that are in a very vulnerable situation, that if they are to access something like this small shelter, we are going to see potential family separation in a time when families need to be together the most. And we're also putting them potentially in harm's way next to folks who might have more explicit needs. When again, the reality is they need safe and dedicated shelter and resources. This also extends to our concern about young adults, particularly those who are aging out of the foster care system. We see a lot of transitional homelessness with young folks who hit 18 years old and they have nowhere to go. And they end up on the streets, which again, not a great option. But I'm worried by concentrating to one site, we are going to be amplifying vulnerability to those most susceptible to exploitation, which are, again, children, families, and young adults. But there's also the question of should sober people that don't need, should sober people be camping next to people who are dealing with substance abuse addiction? What happens if a family has to choose separation if it means a night off the streets? And then what happens to those who might choose taking a chance being criminalized by sleeping off-site versus being harassed or harmed on site? Again, the study committee provided some really great recommendations. 7 through 17 alone would solve so many of our issues in Chatham County. And like the previous speaker, we want to be here as a resource and provide what we can. But it is just something that I would hope that y'all would consider.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Pappy. Said I see no questions, and I think that I've discussed before, Senator Summers' bill is not the solution. It's trying to get the spread out situation to where it's okay. We can group them together in a place that hopefully we can work to get better housing where people can take a shower, they can get off the streets, because that's where you got to solve the homeless problem. These people are not there because they're their own choice. Most of them are not. And so for me, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to improve the situation of these people's lives. I think Senator Summers' bill is to try to get them into safer locations. So appreciate your testimony. I'm going to call on Caitlin Mallory, if I pronounce that correctly.
Caitlin Malloy.
Malloy, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Caitlin Malloy, I'm the Public Policy Counsel with the Southern Center for Human Rights. I'm not going to take up much time because I just want to say I support a lot of the remarks that have been made already. Appreciate that the pieces were taken out of the bill from last year that sort of criminalized homelessness, and recognize, I think everyone agrees that that's not the right approach to solving the issue. But also concerned that Section 1 of the bill disincentivizes local communities from exploring solutions to reduce unsheltered homelessness outside of the criminal legal system. So really would just prefer to see more of those proactive recommendations from the study committee. We'll just leave it at that.
And I think that can be done in another piece of legislation. So thank you very much. I think I got a country lawyer named Demetrius Calzer and a city slicker named Rushi Patel. So for our friends from GMA, and Rushi didn't show up. He was scared. He was scared of the country lawyer.
Appreciate y'all. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Demetrius Calls, a Government Relations Associate and Attorney at Georgia Municipal Association. Appreciate the time to come speak with y'all about Senate Bill 62. I think the biggest source of consternation for us and our members comes in Section 1, lines 33 through 37. Particularly the part which reads that a person may bring a civil action for violation of this code section for the person and for the state. I know it was mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that this is a narrow bill, but this is far from narrow because it subjects all 537 cities to unnecessary litigation. It pretty much takes the element of discretion which was given to the Attorney General in that previous subsection and lays it at the whims of the general public. And because the issue of homelessness is ubiquitous, it's in Eatonton, it's in Millersville, Columbus, Savannah, Waycross, wherever you may imagine, that subjects all those cities unto the whims of said public. And so the first point about the issue in line 33 for the person, well, that person may not have standing for penalties, and their recourse of action will be a writ of mandamus pursuant to section 9-6-24 of the OCGA. And even if they were asking for a mandamus, they would have to get approval from the Attorney General. And then the second part of it, if they're wanting to bring an action on behalf of the state or in the state's name pursuant to OCGA 23-3-122, they would still need approval from the Attorney General. And so those are our biggest issues with the bill, and we would ask that this body consider removing it from the legislation.
Well, you got the ear of one Senator Estevez, so one lawyer to another said
he was speaking my language in the law, mandamus and key tam and all kinds of
don't get
stuff.
too excited.
All right. Question about being a key tam plaintiff. Usually key tam lawsuits are left where the key tam plaintiff is trying to recover on behalf of the government money. Whether it's fraud that they've suspected or some kind of crime. Here, the concern is that there isn't money to be found, right? So essentially, we would be subsidizing lawsuits from plaintiffs that may bring a claim because they see someone sleeping on a sidewalk, versus anything else. And the state of Georgia could be potentially pay for a lot of litigation costs that don't ultimately help the state advance ending homelessness. Is that right?
Senator, you know what you speak. I also believe that it will be broadening those key time actions beyond the purview of what they're originally for. And it does give an individual the opportunity to bring an action subjecting not only the state to costly expenses, but local governments and thus local taxpayers to costly and unnecessary litigation as well.
And that's because the the bill rightfully allows municipalities and counties to participate with the state in not only, it helps municipalities and counties participate with the state in opening up some of these sanctioned encampments. And if they're participating, they're going to be subject to the lawsuit regardless.
That's a great point. It's a catch-22, but also it brings home a point that addressing unsheltered homelessness, it takes a coalition of folks and partnerships from state, local, and federal level.
I'm not real up on all the legalese, but I will ask you right there on line 30, where it talks about the attorney general may recover. I believe that leaves him discretion as to whether he wants to be a party to that lawsuit or not. Near as I can tell, anybody can bring a suit. Said all they got to do is have the correct amount of money, go to the courthouse and file a suit. Whether they're successful or not, it's a different thing. And whether the attorney general decides to participate in that will be up to the attorney general, as I'm reading the way this is written. Am I correct?
I appreciate the question and the attention to that line, Mr. Chairman. Our consternation comes in that subsection to section 3. You're right. Discretion still remains with the attorney general, but such discretion is not provided for in subsection 3, and therefore it may be left to the whims of the general public to bring a suit, and that would subject cities, and counties to unnecessary litigation if that suit is just to be thrown out in the end. I have a city slicker lawyer just stepped back.
I saw the city slicker come back in.
He wanted to make
If you'd like to join us up here, Mr. Patel said we'd be glad to have the city slicker lawyer. We got the country lawyer here.
He's better. Apologies for the stepping out for a second, but one of the issues here is when you look at paragraph 3, it has 2 clauses, as my colleague just mentioned, and it allows the person to bring a civil action as their person, but there's already a place in the Georgia law for people to file mandamus actions if they believe that the government is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that already exists in Georgia law to file a mandamus action. They wouldn't have any penalty. They wouldn't have any standing to get a penalty here as the person. So this is why it says and for the state. But here, there's only 2 other places in Georgia law that I have found where a regular person can file a lawsuit as the state. And both of them deal with false claims. And in both of those statutes, there's a whole procedure for notifying the state, notifying the attorney general about their lawsuit that they're filing. There's nothing in here in paragraph 3 that allows or tells this person that they have to notify the attorney general that they've filed a suit on behalf of the state. Now, here's where this could actually be counterproductive. If a local government is facing lawsuit after lawsuit by people filing lawsuits as the state, there's nothing in this statute or this bill that actually requires a local government to outlaw public camping, sleeping, or obstruction on sidewalks. If you look at lines 17 and 18 and 22, it says that a county or municipal corporation shall not adopt or enforce any policy under which the county or municipal corporation prohibits or discourages the enforcement of any order or ordinance. City doesn't have to have an order or ordinance. So what this would actually do is if they're facing lawsuits, a city that does have an ordinance would repeal that, and then you're going to have more homelessness on the streets and more homelessness on the sidewalks. So this is a counterproductive bill.
Thank you. Said you got some other questions here. Said I'm not sure who they're for the country lawyer, city lawyer, but Senator Robertson, I think you were up next.
Yeah,
And then I've got, I believe, Senator Williams.
and I think the second
then-
attorney made a point that I was going to make is that if the city is concerned, the city could just pull the ordinance off and say we allow homelessness on our streets. And I think, of course, the recklessness and irresponsibility of that would be entirely up to the taxpayers and the voters to deal with that action. And I think it would be exactly what's going on. A great book that I read during the off session was San Francisco, written by a progressive from the West Coast, that talks about the absolute failure of San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and other communities that have chosen that very action to allow homelessness to run amok in their cities, and without any consideration for compassion for the individuals out there who are suffering mental health. So I think the problem we have is that every time somebody tries to come up with a reasonable solution, we get in an impasse because cities feel that they're being told what to do, but nobody would tell a city what to do if the cities would do what they should do. So I think that's that would get rid of all this problem, but I appreciate that. You made my point on the repeal of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Said Senator Williams, you have a question. I'll let you.
I do. I do. Thank you. My question, we're talking about is just simple as this. Can the homeless people get together under the statute and file suit to make the city provide these campgrounds and things? Would this also give them the option to do that?
That's a great question, Senator. I don't know that this proposed legislation requires any sort of campground on the local level. So I don't know that those homeless folks or unhoused folks would have the ability to file that lawsuit. Here, I think what this is contemplating is a violation for acts that a local government takes discouraging enforcement of camping and such on the street. So I don't think it would require anything on the local government's part to provide at that point.
I just keep seeing this one call, that's all. And I just didn't know how many of them might have a phone and they just make that one call. And they start suing all the cities to provide.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator. Said Senator Mello, you have a question.
I do, for my friends at GMA, when we agree, and when we don't, we don't. But to this subsection of 943, page 3 through 50, it's about the state auditor, performance audit of all the expenditures by the state, municipalities, county, with substantial homeless populations. Just kind of looking at that, does that not already happen when they prepare their financial statements and send them back to the state? Because it would list what they spent their money on in their financials already.
That's also a good question. You know, cities in the state of Georgia are required to have budgets. Some are have annual audits. Some have audits every other year, depending on the size of the city. Those come in varying levels of details. I would tell you that the more sophisticated, larger cities or mid-sized cities are going to have great detail to even that level. Some of the really small cities probably do not, you know, on their audits and their budgets.
So my question would be, by looking at that, this would have an unintended consequence for the smaller cities that don't have the staff to get all this information, to track it and provide it back, and by virtue.
It might.
From the 29, he's like, what is he talking about?
We trying to get through
Yeah.
to get to a vote. So let's hurry.
In my 30 years of working for consolidated government and working with other smaller cities, I don't know any city that submits a budget that does not have to meet an accounting standard of the professional accounting. There are, and I know a good friend of mine sitting in the back that ran a city that was really good at this, but the smallest city is held to the same standards as the largest city when it comes to accounting for taxpayer funds. So I think this is probably in me, the least concerning about the legislation, because those standards are out there. GMA promotes that training and promotes those kind of standards, as does ACCG. So I feel comfortable with that, because during the study committee, what we did determine is there's a lot of money in the wind. And I think we just saw an example where $10 million in rent support was sent back to the federal government, even though it was needed, due to unintended oversight. So, but that was discovered. It wasn't hidden. But our biggest fear was during the study committee is that there's monies out there that are being spent on other things other than addressing the homeless and the unsheltered.
I have a goal of being done in most of our meetings in less than an hour, so I'm going to keep us moving. Thank you for your testimony. So the last person on my list is President Doug Shipman, the city of Atlanta. He's not president of the U.S. Don't get confused.
As my wife likes to remind me.
We got a judge and now we got the president.
There you go.
And we're doing pretty good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Doug Shipman. I'm the president of the Atlanta City Council. I appreciate the opportunity today just to speak very briefly on this issue. And I appreciate that the Senate is contemplating what is one of the most serious issues that on a daily basis municipalities are facing. 3 weeks ago today, I actually participated in the count that happens once a year where we go out and try to understand who is on the street. I personally went out from 9 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. and interviewed about 24 folks who were unsheltered that evening. And most of them do face, as has been mentioned, mental health issues, HIV positive, other medical issues. And I would say that about 80% of them in my conversation said if there was a bed available that evening, they would go to it. They wanted to be sheltered. But we face a lack of housing. We face a lack of shelter. I want you all to know that we are working diligently on that. We have passed more money on pre-arrest diversion. We have passed more money in order to acquire older hotels and turn them into permanent transitional housing. We are continually looking for affordable and efficient ways to provide more housing for those who are unsheltered. And as most of you know, under federal rulings, we cannot move somebody involuntarily unless we have a place to put them that evening. And so the key really to this, and any assistance would be welcome, is to provide more housing that can then allow people to move into transition. To this bill, I just want to speak on a city leadership level to 3 issues. One, which has been mentioned, the section pertaining to civil lawsuits. I think that we want to make sure that we avoid the unintended consequence of citizens being upset and then clogging up our attention and our resources with lawsuits that really would not, in fact, make any difference. I think that we have to be very careful about that because this is a very passionate issue. Citizens, business owners get very upset. And sometimes it is just the reality of trying to form a relationship with somebody so that they're willing to go into a housing situation or they're on a waiting list for housing, which is something that is very, very important for us all to deal with, not in this bill, obviously, but at some point, whether it's IDs, whether it's paperwork, whether it's the application processes, many folks who want to be housed are waiting months and months in order simply to get through the bureaucratic process. And so I think that as we think about this, in order to make sure that people can move through that process, on one hand, this bill contemplates civil lawsuits. I hope that we also are contemplating the regulatory burden that folks who are unsheltered are facing. The second is in the section regarding the audit. Senator Robertson is absolutely right. Municipalities should be and ought to be sophisticated at this. My concern is that by going into detail around the efficiency, many of the agencies we use, whether they be churches or whether they be synagogues or whether they be very, very small street-oriented organizations, are not necessarily going to be highly sophisticated, not just when it comes to finances, but when it comes to things like the goals and objectives. I mean, they're out doing very, very street level work. And I think the unintended consequence, the way this bill is written right now, is that it may actually make municipalities want to only work with very big agencies, with those that are at scale. And I think that'd be a mistake. This work is often done best when it is done absolutely as close to those at the neighborhood and street level as possible. And so I would ask that the committee look very, very closely at the wording of that. And then finally, in the camping section, the notion of using state property, I would hope that somehow, if this is adopted, that there could be language inserted to work with the local municipality. I can only imagine that the state opens a sanctioned camping facility in someone's neighborhood without actually talking to the city. I think that I'll probably get those phone calls. I'm not sure that the state will get those phone calls. And so I think that if we're going to walk down this route to make sure that there is some sort of way in which there's a requirement to work with the municipality, because otherwise I can imagine a situation where a very well-intended opening of a place could actually backfire on everyone and lead to even less support. Because I think at the end of the day, we all know that one of the key factors in addressing homelessness is public support, and not just public support generally, public support in a neighborhood, public support in a business owner. A small business owner says, yes, I am willing to have more shelter down the street from me because I'm willing to basically be a part of the solution. And I don't want us to do anything that would lessen public support and in the long term, really tie our own hands at the local level as we're trying to move person by person off the street and into long-term housing. Thank you for letting me be here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chipman. They appreciate your comments. I see no questions on your comments today. So we've had a lot of discussion about the bill. I don't think that the bill, yes, ma'am.
And that's where I was and not able to sign up here. But I have.
You'll make it brief. We're going to make an exception, but I don't like to do that. So
I shared these.
if you would pull that microphone around there, state your name, and then go as briefly as possible.
Yes, sir. My name is Elizabeth Apley. I'm an attorney. I represent the Georgia Supportive Housing Association, Presbyterians for Better Georgia, Enterprise Community Partners, and Georgia Advancing Communities Together on this issue of homelessness. We propose that you tighten up the language in section 1, requiring that the policy either to prohibit or discourage, or evidence of on line 20 of prohibiting or discouraging be written to make clear. Discouraging is a vague term. It has no legal meaning. And so we urge you to consider making the policy that's adopted under subpart A on line 16, and again on line 20, where it's prohibiting or discouraging, be in writing. This issue has also been raised, and so we propose to clarify what the authors intend by making clear that the presence of people sleeping or camping in public shall not alone constitute evidence that a policy has been adopted to prohibit or discourage such enforcement. And furthermore, that the provisions of this code section not be interpreted to limit the legal exercise of discretion by peace officers or prosecutors. And finally, to address the 8th Amendment cruel and unusual punishment issue of criminalizing sleeping or camping in the street that has been decided by a number of courts, we suggest that the presence of homeless persons camping or sleeping on the street shall not give rise to criminal liability when they are unable to access safe, decent shelter that meets their needs.
Ms. Apley, I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
Can I just finish with
You're
section 3?
you're done. I'm sorry, you didn't sign up, and my 5 o'clock hour's here. So we're gonna see what my committee wants to do. I hate to cut you off, but you know, that's what happens when you're not here, when you want to sign up. So
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Chairman. We've had testimony. We've had a lot of things. I know what the bill does pretty well right now. I know what it doesn't do. It doesn't solve homelessness in any part of Georgia. Said I think it does provide some relief in which way is going on. Sarah Esvez, your light's on. Have you got a question?
Briefly offer a couple amendments based on what we heard.
Okay. We'll be glad to entertain those amendments if you've got them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Summers, for this bill, and appreciate your efforts in tackling this tough issue. 3 key amendments that I think would help address some of the concerns that have been raised here today. One is to strike discourages from 17 and 20, line 17 and 20, just because as a lawyer, the term discourage is ambiguous. And when those lawsuits are brought, whether it's from the attorney general or from a plaintiff, it's going to be hard for municipalities and counties in the state to understand, to know what the line is for discourages. And then two, the second amendment would be to strike lines 33 to 37, which is the key tam plaintiff, which is typically reserved for lawsuits where there's financial recovery. And then 3 would be to in section 3 include standards around human waste and sanitation and safety and security for those officials, so that we can potentially avoid lawsuits that would come if those private companies have campgrounds that are not safe or sanitary, particularly if we're trying to provide them state immunity from those claims. There should be minimum standards that they're
Senator, I believe all that would be covered under public health. That's not something we're not willing to take up on this bill. I'm going to suggest you skip that one altogether, just because that is under public health regulations, said on what you can do and can't do with those type of things. But if there's any discussion on and I don't know if you want to take the discourages as a separate motion, and then the lines 33 through 37 said but if there's discussion on that, I'll hear from any committee member. If there's are you making those in the form of a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make those in the form of motion. Those could be 2 motions.
Okay, the first motion is to strike the word discourages. Said is there a second? There's a second on that. Said any further discussion? Who was that second? It made. Thank you, Senator Mallow. Said is there any Senator Robertson, you got?
Yeah, I appreciate what the senator's doing on the discourages. I think that goes by the Supreme Court saying, we don't know what pornography, we can't define pornography, but we know what it is if we see it. And so while I do understand the ambiguous word, most of these types of words are defined in the court system through case law. But I think the last witness mentioned something, and I believe I heard her correctly, where she said discourages in writing. And so just as a side note, and I would yield to the author's opinion on what he feels about it, but municipal corporation prohibits or places into policy the enforcement of any ordinance or avoiding that as far as I think trying to accomplish what the author was trying to accomplish. But again, I'll yield to him for his opinion on the amendment.
Hey, Senator Butler, I believe Leader Butler, I believe you have a question.
I don't have a question. I'd like to make a motion to table this legislation until it can be better perfected.
Is there a second to the motion to table? That motion dies for lack of a second. On your motion, Senator, I don't know if you want to entertain, he's offering an amendment to your motion instead of the striking or discourages to, I believe, how would you say that again? Senator Robertson.
To the gifted barrister, I would ask if maybe to, as opposed to strike discourages, which I assume the author, or I know the author sat down with legislative counsel to work through this, the county or municipal corporation prohibits or places into policy, in however the wording legislative council feels, any or places, passes any policy that prohibits the enforcement.
Senator, if I can
Yeah.
help you really quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe in between any and policy in line A, shall not adopt or enforce any written, officially adopted and written policy under which the county or municipal corporation prohibits or discourages the enforcement.
I think maybe, and as you said that, any written or unwritten policy. Because as we know, unwritten policy that behaviors, action supersede policy. As we've seen in case law where you may have a policy, but the policy is not enforced, other actions are allowed to occur. And after a while, that becomes the policy, the practice, excuse me. Practice becomes policy, practice being the correct word. So a county or municipal corporation shall not adopt or enforce any policy or practice under which the county or municipal corporation prohibits the enforcement of any order.
Excuse me, Senator Estes, should they, you offered the written, I'm not sure if I followed exactly where you wanted to put that in there.
Well, I was trying to adjust for Senator Robertson's suggestion. So enforce any written policy. That was my change to the amendment that I've offered.
Okay.
So in line 16, adding written.
Could you restate that for us?
Yeah, I know Robertson said written policy or practice, but my amendment is to line 16 in between any and policy include an official written policy. And then it continues under which the county or municipal corporation. And then the same thing for line 20 shall not adopt an officially written policy that prohibits or discourage a police officer. And then it goes on from there. So very similar changes to line 16 and 20.
Yes, sir, Senator.
It is a foregone conclusion that changes always makes people apprehensive.
They do.
This is a start. This bill is very, very simple. It's a start. These words have been vetted by legal counsel. I've been with them for months on this, and I'm going to be very candid with everybody at the table here. I have given on every level there is back to the opposition, or however you want to say their words, on all these bills to take things out of these bills they want. We're going to keep on where the bill is just nothing but a piece of paper. I mean, I'm ready to move the thing forward. And if we need to change it in the House, we need to adjust it down the road. Let's adjust it down the road, because I can't speak legal action with a lawyer. And I appreciate you. I understand what you're saying. But I know that when Legislative Council sat down, we went over and over and over these changes. You know, this is how they suggested it. When Q-Town came up, if Q-Town was the rule, then nobody would be able to sue. Only the Attorney General would be able to sue. With Q-Town, it allows people, it allows me to bring a lawsuit. It allows a person to do what they want to do. But without that in there, you're just stuck. So if you don't mind, I'd just like to move the bill forward as we are.
Without getting too many people excited in the room, because I know how some people get excited on floor motions and that kind of stuff. So Senator Estes, I would ask if the senator has spoken on what he requests. He wants a vote up or down on the bill as it is. So without trying to disregard his thing, would you hold your changes to maybe a motion on the floor? That's where he wants to go with it.
Work with you.
I think that may be, he wants to vote up or down on the bill, and I don't like it going out of here where it's not fully supported. But at the same token, I'm going to try to appreciate our colleagues that bring a bill that, if he just wants a yes or no, I want to give him what he wants.
I look forward to working.
Wish they had your legal mind.
I can.
Would you withdraw your?
I withdraw.
Okay. That said, no further discussion on the bill. Senator Robertson,
I'd make a motion to pass.
any other discussion? Any second from Senator Steele? Put you on the record there. What number are you? 8. Got a second? So we have a motion and a second do pass on LC 339373S. The all in favor, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed. 1, 2, 3. Motion do pass carries. Your bill's passed. I do want to encourage you to work with the colleagues here in the Senate, and y'all come up with good language, and we'll try to move it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.